Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this episode of Gospel of Two Wheels. In this episode, we talked to Brady Meador from TBT Racing. They are a suspension engine service company, originally based out of California, but Brady lives in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And we talk about everything from suspension oil to clicker settings, springs, everything. So, hope you enjoy it. If you like this, subscribe. Really appreciate it. Share this thing. Give us a like. Comment down below on what you want us to talk about next. We'll try to get one of these out every week. Hope you guys have a great day. Hey everybody, it's Morgan and
Brady Meador from TBT Racing.
Yes, coming to you live from the Highland Cycle Studio here at my house. Super fancy. Camera's a little cockeyed. Sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, we're here to talk with Brady about suspension and TBT and all that stuff. We are here ready to go. You guys fire off questions for Brady at any time. We'll start with Brady. Give us a lowdown on who you are, what you do, all that stuff.
Brady Meador from Tulsa, Oklahoma area. Been involved in motorcycles my whole life, racing dirt bikes and road racing a little bit, and my family's owned a shop for a long time, and just doing the bike thing. So,
and what is TBT Racing?
TBT Racing is tuning by Travis. Travis Flatinau started it a long time ago in the early 90s. He's worked for NASCAR and round cars and Baja, and he's just done a little bit of everything. I started working with him about 5 years ago. And we've got like 7 shops around the country and around the world. So we all work together and come up with good settings and, help each other and come up with stuff together. And Travis is super good on setups and figuring out how to make things work good. So
right
on. Pretty good.
Bill Butt, what's going on? How you doing? So why don't we just talk a little bit about suspension in general? What would you say? Let's talk about chassis setup. What would be if you don't have, let's say you don't have the money set together to have someone else dial your suspension in for you? What is the first thing you ought to be doing to a new to you dirt bike?
New to you dirt bike, you need to make sure you have the right springs at the minimum for what you're doing. You need to set your sag, make sure your clickers are kind of in the middle, and kind of know what the bike does with the clickers that tin out on each side. And then go ride it on some trail that you're used to, and then, go in 4 or 5 clicks and see what the differences are, and, just play with it first. You don't have to, everybody doesn't have to have a revalve. I mean, it's obviously, we can always make it better than stock stuff, but some guys can get away with just proper springs and having the right sag set and not having your fork set up this far in the triple clamps, just basic stuff.
Right. And who do you recommend? So let's just say some guy buys a bike, he's 200 pounds, so he's clearly heavier than what the manufacturer says it should be. Where do you go to get that information, like the best information for the springs that you should have?
I mean, everybody's a little different, but you can call us and we can give you spring rate recommendations, or Race Tech has the builder that you can do on there. The heavier guy you are, the farther that is off, I think. I'm a big guy, obviously, so the recommendations for me is a little bit farther out of the realm than what you really should be running.
Okay.
So, but yeah, average size guy, 200 pounds, 220. I mean, Race Tech's pretty close. You can call us and I can get you the right information and stuff. So
right on.
No problem.
And who do you recommend for springs? Like if you're going to buy springs?
I mean, Factory Connection E-Bach makes their springs. They have good springs. Race Tech has good springs. We get some springs from Q Springs, which is SKF importer. Tech, they import those springs from Italy. They're really good.
Right on. Nice. Yeah. So after you got the right springs, we'll talk about sag. Because I mean, a lot of guys know, but a lot of guys don't. What are we talking about?
So the sag is how much your bike squats under its own weight, and then that's the bike sag, and then the free sag, and then rider sag is when you're sitting on the bike or standing on the bike. So that has a working window. Each bike's a little bit different. Normally it's around 100 millimeters rider sag and 35 millimeters static sag. So you want to make sure that you're close to that window as possible, because if it's too much, then the bike's going to, chopper, and it's not going to want to turn good. Or if it's doesn't have enough, then it's real squirrely on the front end and doesn't get good traction. So,
right on.
So, yeah.
And I've noticed like everybody has a little bit of their own personal preference. Like for me,
Yeah.
I end up in the back seat too much.
Yeah.
Sometimes, especially at the end of a race or end of a long
Yeah.
ride. So I run a little bit less rider sag than some folks because
Keeps you more on the front bike.
it just forces the weight onto the front.
Yep.
So
For sure. Yeah, that's all preference. I mean, that's the thing about suspension is there's not a set in stone. This is only how it works, because some people like a softer feeling bike and some people like a stiffer feeling bike. And I mean, depending on what you're riding in. Where we ride in Oklahoma and Arkansas and Missouri, it's a lot of rocks and a lot of like square edge just will beat you up stuff. So the softer stuff seems to work a little bit better. So
right on. Okay, Jay Coleman asks, this is a great question. Do you like bladders for shocks?
yes. I mean,
and look, I'm with you. I'm 100% with the bladder for shock. Give me the reason why.
Showa and KYB use bladders. They're the biggest manufacturers of suspension in the world. Olin's and WP use the pistons, and sometimes the pistons are okay, but for square edge braking bumps and rocks and roots and that kind of stuff, the shock with the bladder, it lets it move so easier, so it's softer, or it doesn't kick you as much as the piston. And a lot of time the piston band will wear out and the piston will get caulked in the side of the reservoir, and it won't be as smooth. So, and I've seen the videos of people, oh, look at this shock, the oil's all bubbly. Well, I mean, anybody that can stroke a shock up and down 3 or 4 times and pop it apart real quick, they'll be bubbly no matter what. So, I mean, there is some of them do leak, but a lot of that stuff they see videos of is, people just making it look worse than it really is. So
yeah,
if it was an issue, KYB would not be using a bladder.
Right.
And KYB, every shock they have has a bladder pretty much.
Yeah.
And WP Pro Components, they wouldn't sell a bladder conversion kit for their track shock or for the new shocks. They wouldn't sell that if it was a bad product. So
right.
I don't know. We use bladders because they work better. So.
Yeah, I feel like, forever I rode Yamahas. Obviously, they all have bladders. Now I've got some KTMs under my belt, and I've got bladder kits on them. And to me, the piston just doesn't make it seems to complicate the system.
Right.
And I don't like complicated systems.
To fail and wear out, and the rubber bladders. I mean, they'll wear out, but it's eventually.
Yeah, everything
wears out eventually. Not like a piston. So.
Yeah. So bladders up, pistons down. It's not the pistons don't
it's
work.
Not pistons are bad. It's just they don't work as good as a bladder.
Right. And the bladders are so easy to deal with when working, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to rebuild it is so much easier. You don't have to set some height and all that stuff. You just leave the thing and you're good to go.
Yep.
So a big fan of bladders for cars and everything, mountain bikes and stuff like that. Javier says WP new generation's pistons changed to composite nylon and they cavitate. Yep. So the bladder just makes sense. It just doesn't.
Yeah, I mean the bladder is either going to work or it's not. Where a piston can get caulked, it can wear out. You can have egg shaped in the bladder, the outside or the reservoir, so the piston will not really seal very good. I mean, there's lots of things with the piston that I don't like.
Yeah, so. Probably brand new. Is when they're fine.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So obviously, hot topic: air forks. Yeah. Yes, no. What's good? What's bad?
I mean, I have a 19 450 XCF, and I have air forks on my bike. They work okay. I mean, they're not the best fork I've ever ridden. I mean, they're the later generation, the last generation of them are okay. They definitely do feel different. Some people don't like the feel. Tuning, there's a lot more tunability with them because you can adjust pressures. I don't know. They're okay.
Yeah. What have you seen? Many failures?
Few on the WPs. Not very many on the Japanese stuff.
Right.
So I mean, early PSF1 stuff. If you lost the seal, the fork would collapse. But that was the only kind of failure. Put a new seal in it, and then it's fine. So.
Yeah.
But the new AER stuff is. I've seen a few early versions have failures, but not the late model stuff.
Right on.
So.
And have you? One complaint that people have about that is inconsistency over a ride. Have you noticed that? Like I I'm not good enough. I had a bike
I
with Air
mean-
Force. I'm not good enough to notice that.
I think most of the inconsistency is just people getting tired and blaming it on the fork.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm obviously not the specimen of fitness over here, but I just did an Ironman race and did 6.5 hours on bike, and I mean, the fork felt just as fine at the end of the race as it did at the beginning for me. So,
Yeah. I've always said that if at the end of a long ride or race, whatever, 100 miles
yeah,
and it's rough, if you are, regardless of the kind of fork you're having,
right.
if you're hitting things and you feel like it's working well, you've clearly got a good setup.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Because
or you're in shape.
Or you're in shape.
Yeah.
Because I get beat down tired, and I've noticed, I can't tell you how many times in the past you're riding, and it's like, man, the suspension sucks. It was so good this morning.
Yeah.
And then you get on it the next morning, and it's like, oh.
Yeah.
It works great.
I'm fresh, and the fork's still fine.
Shane says, did you go to school to study about suspension work? If so, where? Good question.
Yeah, so I worked with the company, or worked for a company called Tulsa Cycle Supply, and Craig Chapman ran that company, owned it. And he was like tinker with suspension, so I learned a lot from him. And then I got a beta in 2013 and was looking for someone to do my suspension on that thing, and talked to Travis out in California. And then one thing led to another. I flew to California and spent a few weeks out there, went to school with him, and learned the way that they do stuff versus the way I was doing it from before, and kind of went to school and then been doing it ever since. So, yeah. So
Right on. I have a question. So those of us who are big KYB fans see that the gas
Mhm.
shows up with the KYB forks. Josh Hartleroad is on here. He's watching. He bought a gas solely because of that.
Yep.
But has noticed that they don't work. He does not feel like they work as good as a Yamaha KYB.
It's just set up.
Is it just set up? It's not chassis.
It's
geometry?
exactly the same. The components are exactly the same setup as what's on a 250F or 250X Yamaha.
Okay.
Like I spec'd out a 250X Yamaha, measured everything, checked all the shim stacks and everything, and then took a 2018 300R, whatever their race edition is, and took it all apart and spec'd it out. It's exactly the same setup, spec to spec. So, but no, we have a couple guys in Texas running them, and I have them things working really good. They're super happy with them. So
nice.
Yeah.
Because I wondered if it was a chassis geometry situation.
No, I don't think so.
Big
I just think
there.
they copied what was working on the Yamaha and put it in there, and kind of went from there. So,
what a crazy idea! Copy the thing that works really well instead
copy
of
the best suspension out there and put it on.
Yeah, instead of reinventing the wheel.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So.
Conventional or upside down fork? ? Says John. What like? So John, I'm gonna adjust your question. Chime in if this doesn't match, but I'm gonna talk about. Let's just talk about off-road riding, not racing, but just off-road trail riding at a decent pace, intermediate pace.
I mean, there's a reason why everything's went to upside down forks. So I mean, open or conventional forks are fine, but you have the fork overhang underneath the axle that gets hung up on rocks and roots and ruts and stuff. They're way more flexible, which I mean, on a trail bike's okay, but anytime you pick the pace up at all, it's not very good because you don't know what the front end's doing.
Sure.
It's got too much flex and it's moving around too much. So, everything's gone to upside down forks. I mean, there's not really an advantage other than flex to go to conventional. So
yeah, and maybe cheap, like price. So and Brady and I were talking about this last night about manufacturers should make some inexpensive motorcycles.
Yeah.
Because not everybody can afford a $10,000 motorcycle.
Nope.
And maybe a $4,000 motorcycle that's decent would be cool. And maybe make something like the XR 650 with conventional forks, but make it cost $4,000.
Right. Yeah.
Something like that. That wouldn't be, in my opinion, that would be an okay reason to put conventional forks on something.
Right.
Obviously, we all love brand new, shiny, fancy, high zoot stuff. But there's a lot to be said for just getting out and riding. So in 2010, I raced 1,000 with Roger and Anna, and we had the hands down best part of that race was we were on a 250F, so it was really slow.
Yeah.
So you could just hold it wide open and feel like you're going fast, but it wasn't like gonna kill you fast.
Right.
It was awesome. Like topped out like 78 miles an hour.
It's a lot better than 100 on a 650.
Yeah, it was awesome. Seals. What do you think are the best seals?
OEM or SKF. And SKF has two different seals, so we run HD, which are the double-lipped heavy-duty seals.
Yeah,
so
that's what we run.
The best.
And just so you guys that are watching know about the two versions of SKFs, because I've had some customers come in like holding seals in their hands, like these are like $3 cheaper than the seals you sell.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I know, because it's a different part number.
Right.
And it's the right seal. I mean, it fits. It's good, and it's a good seal. Right. I mean, it's not a bad seal. No. But the HDs are a little bit more money, but they hold up way.
Yeah, a lot better.
Way better.
They work good, but I don't know. We have a couple places in Oklahoma. Stillwater has like this really fine red dirt, and Oklahoma City's the same way. And I haven't really found a fork seal that lasts forever in that stuff. It's just the dirt's so fine it gets up in the seals. But yeah, the heavy duty ones last as long as pretty much everything else. So,
or a little
longer.
Have you ever run the mud scrapers that those guys make? How do those work?
They work good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they a pain to take off and clean?
No, it's just a cotter pin.
Just a little cotter pin? Okay. I've never run one.
The cotter pin out, pull it out, and it comes apart off the fork.
Okay.
So it's no big deal.
Do you feel like they help at all?
Yeah. Okay. And especially in a mud race, they keep the fork tube pretty much clean.
Nice.
So it's going to save your seal. So, and in Oklahoma, all we've had is mud races here lately.
Yeah.
Fork seal service has been good.
Yeah. Matt Christopher says, I have a KTM 500 EXC. As I get better, I feel like I should stiffen the suspension. Do you get more control or risk being bounced off beyond my control? What do you?
No, because stiffer suspension is probably the faster you go, the better it is. I mean, that's why supercross suspension is so stiff, is because those guys are slamming into stuff so fast. If it's slow, it's going to bottom out, and then you're not going to have control when it kicks you. So stiffer suspension is better than way too soft suspension. So
right,
but those 500s are a little soft to begin with. I don't know how much he weighs, but
I will say this: like if you're a bigger guy, like our friend Brady, and you start putting the right springs in your bike. Correct me if I'm wrong, but to me that necessitates a revalve more
for sure
than if you just use stock springs.
Yeah, if you're above like probably 215, 220, you're gonna have to revalve it with springs to make up for the valving for the heavy spring.
Right, because the spring's gonna want to blow back through, right?
Yeah.
So like
you're gonna need to add valving in there for a bigger guy. So, and just like with super light people, you gotta have to soften, take valving out of it so the spring actually works like it's supposed to.
Right.
So I do a lot of like little smaller kids and women, and we have to soften their stuff up when we put lighter springs in it. So.
Yeah, because if you don't think about it, I used to not think about it, but if you put a stiff spring in, because I was bigger than I am now, and you put a stiff spring in it, then that's great. It holds the bike up in the stroke like you want, and maybe it's okay for compression, when you hit things, but then when the wheel now is coming back out to catch the next thing that you're going to hit, the spring is fighting that valving like crazy, and coming back out, and it just turns into a pogo stick.
Pretty much,
basically. Yeah. Richard Dawson says seal savers or no. My answer is no.
Yeah, I mean, there's situations that are nice, but you have to maintain seal savers just like you do everything else. If you put seal savers on there and leave them on there for 20 or 30 hours, then no. But if you peel them up and clean underneath them and make sure they're all clean, then they're okay. But a lot of people don't do that. I like the ones that Velcro on, so you could take them off and on. And like if you go to a mud race, you can put them on there and then take them off afterwards. So
yeah, I feel the same way. I don't even want to mess with them, even the Velcro ones.
I don't run them either.
Quick short story. We had a customer had seal savers like really long. Remember? Whatever. He had these crazy long ones on his bike. He calls in, these fork seals in. Okay, great. So he brings the bike down, and I'm like, all right, fork seals, great. Take care. We'll get back to you when we get it done. And I go to take the thing apart, and his chrome was just pitted in junk.
Oh yeah.
Because they'd been on there for who knows how long, and all the whatever.
Yeah.
Chemicals
from polish the chrome right off
and just
there.
It was junk. So anyway, so I don't like seal savers. Scott Willard, what's your thoughts on running an old style open chamber fork on a newer bike that came with AER forks?
I mean, if you have a set that you like that work good, I mean, there's no problem running them on the new. But that's a good thing about KTM's from like 2003 or 4 until now. I mean, you can swap forks around, and as long as you change axles and wheel spacers out, you can run whatever fork you want to on there. So
Right.
I know a lot of guys keep the old like 2013 and older, the closed cartridge forks. Yeah. They just keep putting those on their newer bikes. So yeah, it's not a problem.
I like those forks. Again, and because I'm not a suspension guy, are those forks? Those seem to me to be awfully close to a KYB fork.
Yeah, they're pretty. I mean, they're the same. I mean, other than having the bladder in top instead of the free piston, I mean, they're a pretty close copy.
Pretty close.
They work
copy.
the same.
Yeah.
The same thoughts on how they're designed.
Right,
so,
and they work great.
Yeah, they work good.
And then they got rid of them.
Yeah, it's cheaper to make air forks than Explorer fork or 4CS forks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are the best forks ever for us.
Yeah. 4CS is great for the suspension world.
Great for,
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Cone valves are the best. Okay, let's talk about cone valves. Like for people that have billions of dollars, like Aleph.
Yeah, no doubt. Super rich.
What actually describe a cone valve in the basic world for all the people that just hear about them?
Cone valve is like the A-kit forks that you can get from WP. They're a good fork. They're like everything's billet machined, like the feet are billet machined, so they're super nice and rigid. They got the DLC coatings. They got all the cool coatings in the internals and all that stuff. So it's basically just like their top of the line fork. For the average guy, you don't really need it.
Right.
The KYB cartridge system that we sell works performance wise, works just as good as a cone valve. I think I ran both of them on my bike. Aleph has my old cone valves. Price wise, I mean, I would go KYB route if it was me, because you're going to have a lot less money wrapped up in them. You don't have all the cool coatings. I mean, we can do the coatings, but you don't really need them for the average guy. More coatings just wear out, and then you have to spend more money to maintain them. So.
Do the coatings, like the DLC stuff, do they last longer?
Not really. I mean, the DLC coating lasts longer than like a Tide nitrate coating, but they both wear out eventually over time.
Right.
So, especially if you're riding in the mud.
Yeah.
DLC is a little slicker than chrome.
So Thomas, assuming I have a KYB swap on his 16 SX and XCF, how do you like it? Thomas, let us know. I'm sure it's awesome.
Yeah, they're super good forks. Like, I mean, really good.
Is it cheaper to do that, or can you put the front end of a Yamaha onto a KTM?
It's cheaper to do. It's so hard to find KYB forks because everybody started putting KYB internals in the WP stuff, so it's almost impossible to find a used set now. And then the triple clamp diameters are different, so you'd have to put triple clamps on there. So I know a few guys that have X-Trig triple clamps for a Yamaha with the KTM stem in it, so they have Yamaha outer tubes and all that, but it's just cheaper to just do the cartridge kit and be done with it.
And what does that cost? From
around $1,700 with springs and a revalve and everything installed, ready to go for you. So,
and that's just the forks, right?
Yeah, just the forks.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And then how much for doing the shock?
I mean, if we do the shock too, depending on if it needs a spring and all that stuff, you're around $200 to $2,200 somewhere in there.
Okay, right on. So on this show we end up talking about mooses a lot.
Yep.
Do you change the valving in a suspension if a guy's going to run mooses, or is it more of a clicker setting?
It's more of a clicker setting. Especially the newer mooses are way more reactive than the old ones, so they feel more like a tube.
Right.
So I think just clicker settings, you can get away with getting that feel that you want.
Gotcha. So, if you're like, I know it depends on the person and all that stuff, but let's just say a guy has a bike that's set up, he likes a lot the way it works with tubes, okay? Yeah. And he's going to put mooses in them. What is the first thing, like what would you do, the first click you would do to that bike?
Nothing.
Nothing, just ride it?
Yeah.
Okay. So if he doesn't love it, where, like, because, like, what is the difference? Like, what's changing there?
I mean, so it just feels, well, if they're new mooses or old mooses, I mean, that kind of, so new mooses feel a lot stiffer, so you want to have to soften it up a little bit to kind of get that feel back.
Gotcha.
If they're worn out mooses, you might have to go in stiffer because they feel dead and they feel worn out, so.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
I don't know.
weight wise anymore, you like if you get a Michelin heavy duty tube versus like a nitro bib and weigh them, they're real close to the same. So weight wise, you're not really changing anything. It's just feel. So
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like the nitros are a little heavy. Do you feel like that? Are they heavier than the Michelin Moose?
No, I don't think so.
God, I swear I had one
I
recently.
haven't put them on a scale, but
I swear I had one recently. Just felt like it weighed a metric ton, and maybe I don't know. We've talked about that too. Some inconsistencies with nitro.
Yeah, I've had a few that's I take it out of the box and I'm like, this is not even close to the right where it's supposed to be. So yeah.
And I can say that there's like at least from Tucker, they're starting to show up as the gray ones.
Oh really?
Like the prototype ones that I got in our KTM, they're starting to show up like that in boxes now. So Bobby says lower linkage maintenance or aftermarket parts. Okay, cool. So let's talk about lower linkage because I saw your little post on Facebook with the little videos and stuff like that. Tell us all about that. Like what's going on there?
I mean, the bad thing is people buy new bikes and they just ride them and they don't take them apart and check. I mean, they don't have any grease in them from the factory. I have a brand new bike and I took it apart and it was just like not even enough grease to cover my finger on there. So I think that's EPA government regulations to whatever. I would always buy a new bike, take it down pretty close to the frame, grease all the pivots, grease all the linkage, grease all that stuff. And I do it twice a year. Like I'll do it summer break, I'll take it all apart and clean everything, grease everything, steering stem bearings, linkage bearings, swing arm bearings, all that. And then in the wintertime when it's too cold to do anything, I'll do the same thing. So
yeah.
And a lot of times I have customers complain, oh, my shock doesn't work, my shock's crap, and then you get the bike and you take the shock off and you try to lift the swing arm and it's like, it doesn't move.
Yeah.
So just like the video I posted the other day,
yeah.
He was complaining about shock and it's just like, well, I mean, the bearings are froze up, so the shock's never going to work. So, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot to suspension work. I mean, you got to maintain your linkage and everything to make sure everything's working like it's supposed to.
Right, and the steering head. I mean, because I've had my own personal bikes that I maybe wasn't maintaining all that great. And it's like, man, the front end of this thing feels like junk.
Yeah.
And then I put it on a stand. And it's like,
yeah, exactly.
It's got this sweet like steering stabilizers set up on it.
Yeah.
And so all these, like everything that you're doing on the bike dial comes into the chassis, right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Like even the motor. Like I've noticed, like we were going up this really rocky thing up on the plateau with some friends. And one of my friends had his suspension valve this is years and years ago before I knew either Javier or Brady or Travis. And he's like, man, the suspension works great, but like right here it's killing me. And I'm like, what gear are you in? Because it was a pretty gnarly hill. And he's like, first. I'm like, dude, no. Shift up like two, because he's on a 4-stroke. I'm like, shift up 2 gears, keep that thing down to the RPM and just easy on the gas. And sure enough, his suspension woes went away because it just settled the bike down.
Yeah.
So all of it comes into play. Like it's not just the little valves and shims inside the thing.
No, there's a whole, everything has to work together.
Yeah. So. I had a guy, actually a very knowledgeable, really good rider, call me and said, man, the back end of my bike is it's terrible. And I'm like, okay. I mean, we hadn't done anything to it. He's just like trying to figure out what was wrong. It was a YZ. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't know, Al, dude. You got to like maybe take it apart and see what's up. And his bottom, I think the bottom bolt on the shock or on the dog. Anyway, one of them was bent.
Oh, yeah.
And like it didn't move.
Yeah.
It was like riding a rigid hardtail chopper.
Just like that lower shock bearing on Yamaha always goes bad because it's down there in the water and like getting splashed all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. So
what do you think about changing linkage geometries?
Most bikes don't need it.
Right.
Yeah. So
are there any bikes that you would say do need it for sure?
I mean, Pro Circuit offers some stuff for like the Super Minis and the KX85s and stuff that make a big difference, but most full-size bikes. I think the Honda has a new linkage that they think it's better, but not in general, no.
Right on.
So,
tech question: favorite oil for suspension forks?
KYB.
Okay. Right on. Yeah. And then favorite oil for shock?
KYB K2C.
There we go. So right on. And do you guys sell that if someone needs that?
Or
do you just get?
No, I mean you can get.
Yeah, we can get it for sure.
Get
I just
from
didn't
a
know.
dealer or Rocky Mountain or whoever sells that stuff. So
cool. Right on.
I buy it in bulk, so it's kind of hard to sell it that way.
Yeah, for sure. Did you guys modify OEM stuff like pistons, PTA, shock needles?
Some stuff yes, some stuff no. I mean, it just kind of depends on the bike. You know, the WP stuff, modify pistons a little bit, but KYB pistons are good, so you don't really have to do much with those.
Right on. Do you flatten them out at all?
Yeah, definitely. Every time I take them apart.
Okay.
Even if I do, like, it's just a service, we check the piston and make sure it's flat.
Gotcha.
Because they'll wear, like, you know, cone or
funky.
Yeah, concave or whatever, and you got to make sure they're flat. They're not flat, they don't seal against the shims.
Nice. Scott Willard, do you have an opinion on Dalsaggio?
I know a lot of guys are running those, and they seem to be pretty good. I think they're just a copy of, like, the closed cartridge bladder forks that KTM ran for a long time. So, I mean, I think so. What I've heard and the customers I have that are running them, they all seem to be happy with them. So I think they're okay.
Yeah, I've seen them. You know, obviously, again, I'm not a suspension tuner, but I've seen the parts. Like we service, you know, I service lots of suspension, and when we take them apart, they seem like good parts.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it's at least high quality stuff. Yeah. You know, it's not junk. My son is on here saying good morning. Good morning, guys. How's it going? They're in the other room.
I will say on the Dalsaggio kit, though, if you're going to buy the full cartridges, I mean, for the money, I would spend the extra and get the KYB set up because then you have the best stuff that you can put in there.
Nice.
So,
okay, cool.
And then a whole bunch, whether we do it or factory, whoever does it, everybody has a lot of experience with KYB internals. So it's a lot. You need parts, you need break something, the cartridge seal goes bad, you have a lot more availability to get parts to fix them. So
right, yeah, because I mean, every dealer that's a Yamaha dealer would have parts, right?
Yeah.
And when you guys do the KYB, are you buying Yamaha parts or just buying direct from KYB?
Direct from KYB, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we've got a kit through them that you can buy everything.
All right, guys, we are bumping into the 40-minute range, so we're gonna shut her down. If anybody has one last question, we'll take that. So we'll take one more question, and then we're gonna go get to work and then go ride dirt bikes. John says 11 WR450F or 19 KTM 450.
19 KTM all day long.
I have 19 anything.
That version of WR was horrible.
There you go. Punk Rock Club, thanks for sticking around. Appreciate it. And we are, you know, if you're watching this on YouTube later, subscribe to the stinking channel by now, okay? Get over it. Subscribe. It means a lot to us. We appreciate it. Yeah, Brady's here till Monday.
Yep.
So come on, say hi, go ride with us. We're going to have a ton of fun. And no matter what you do, make sure you get out and ride your dirt bikes!